Jada Pinkett Smith. Chris Rock asked me out on a date. Jada Pinkett Smith is a narcissist. I've explained elsewhere in detail why that is. And Will Smith, her husband, apparently the one that she's estranged from, is her empathic victim. He's caught very much in her manipulations and the fog of his own emotional thinking. And that's why he has repeatedly continued to engage with her rather than making good a fulsome escape from her. People.com tells us, Jada Pinkett Smith says Chris Rock asked her out on a date amid rumours she and Will were divorcing. He called me and basically he was like, I'd love to take you out. And I was like, what do you mean? I think we can safely file this under bullshit. Why? Because these are the deluded ramblings of a narcissist. I've explained to you that another narcissist, this one's wife, aka Harry's wife, operates with a default setting that all women want to dress like her and be like her, and all men want to knock her hip out. Jada Pinkett Smith has a similar outlook. She believes that many people look upon her and think, do you know what? She is amazing. She's a talented actress, podcaster, broadcaster. She has been a brilliant mother. She has created her own business. She regularly understands other people and quite readily puts herself out there for the greater good of humanity to allow themselves to understand her. And naturally, she is a beacon of sexual attraction to both men and women. And who could blame Chris Rock for asking her out? The article explains, Jada Pinkett Smith hasn't spoken to Chris Rock since the Oscars incident, but she hopes everyone involved can find peace. Patronising facade management. The actress, who, funnily enough, and by no means anything to do with the fact why she's appearing so much in the press recently, has a book out on October the 17th called Worthy. She tells people in a candid new interview that, no, I haven't talked to Chris since the March 27th, 2022, when her husband Will Smith struck him on stage at the Oscars after taking issue with a joke made about Jada. See, parts pass him. Do I have any desire to talk to Chris? She commented. Here's my desire. I just hope that all the misunderstanding around this can be cleared up and that there can be peace, she adds. Oh, aren't we fortunate to have this angel of reconciliation amongst us? I talk about this in the book, Triangulation. I think that there might be some misunderstanding between Chris and I as far as the 2016 Oscars. I think that he might have taken offence, which I meant no harm in offending. That wasn't my intention. But I do think that there's a big misunderstanding there, says Jada, 52. Back in 2016, when Will was overlooked for his concussion performance and the acting nominations recognised no actors of colour, Jada was vocally in support of the #OscarsSoWhite movement, calling for a boycott of the award show. Chris, who was hosting that year, made jokes about Jada in his monologue, and in his Netflix comedy special earlier this year, Chris claimed that Jada told him he should quit the hosting gig out of solidarity. Presumptive behaviour, ordering people around, sense of entitlement. Jada admits to not really recognising the level of pressure Chris might have been under at the time. Well, that's because she has no emotional empathy. I probably should have called him and gone, hey, are you okay? And just know that although I'm speaking out about the Oscars, I do wish you the best, and I just want you to know that. Revision of history. Me taking the time to have called him and said that just to touch base, but his feelings might have been hurt, she says. But Jada adds, all we can ever do is just look at our part and see where could I have done something that would have seemed as if, whatever misunderstanding might have been created, what could I have done to avoid that misunderstanding? The one thing I think about is that call. Word salad. Jada says Chris, 58, called her afterward in 2016, and she thought they'd moved on. He apologised, and I apologised to him as well. Facade management, she says. So I actually thought that we were good, that the hatchet was buried between us, and we hadn't talked since then until 2022 came. Directly after the slap, Jada says Chris came downstage to speak to her during a pause in the live broadcast where he was presenting an award. Chris came down to the end of the stage and tried to apologise to me. He said, "I didn't mean you any harm." I said, "I can't talk about this now. Chris, this is some old shit." Dismissiveness, rejecting his attempt to apologise. I thought this was about the Oscar 2016 and their stuff that they had had before I even came into the picture in the late 80s. I've got to leave that to Will and Chris to talk about, but they got their stuff, for sure. Was Jada, who lives with alopecia, offended by the joke at the centre of the Oscars incident, Chris making a punchline about her shaved head? I mean, that's what comedians do, says Jada. I would just have to say that I'm not really here to make any judgment on how people decide to express themselves and express their art. I'll say that several times I've had my feelings hurt, for sure. I've had my feelings hurt a lot by Chris, but at the end of the day, too, being in the spotlight, it comes with the territory. Well, her face at the Oscars certainly demonstrated that she was not impressed and was amount to a threat to control. Jada also reveals in her book that Chris once asked her out on a date. Explaining more to People, she says, "I think every summer all of the reports would come out that me and Will were getting a divorce. And this particular summer, Chris, he thought that we were getting a divorce. So he called me and basically he was like, 'I'd love to take you out.' And I was like, 'What do you mean?' He was like, 'Well, aren't you and Will getting a divorce?' I was like, 'No, Chris, those are just rumours.' He was appalled, and he profusely apologised, and that was that." A rep for Chris did not respond to People's request for comment. In an interview with Today on Wednesday, Jada revealed to Hoda Kotb that she and Will have been separated for 7 years. Jada confirmed that it wasn't a divorce on paper, but by the time we got to 2016, we were just exhausted with trying. I think we were both kind of just still stuck in our fantasy. Well, I think you are stuck in a clear fantasy, Jada Pinkett Smith, but that relates to thinking that so many people are entirely fascinated by you. The fact that she now talks about Chris Rock apparently asking her out, well, I suspect it probably didn't happen, and that's a revision of history and triangulation which is being done in order to generate headlines for publicity for the new book, Residual Benefit. If it did take place, then of course she is not recognising a boundary. She's relating something which was private between him and her. She's also triangulating the audience with him, making him seem as though he's interfering in somebody else's relationship and therefore smearing him also. All done, of course, to draw attention to herself. She cannot help herself but want to draw that attention onto her. Her narcissism compels her to do so, and thus we're treated to the fantasy land that Jada Pinkett Smith lives in. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.